Yo, what's up everybody? Andy here, also known as GarbageAndy on Twitch and everywhere else on the internet. And today I'm here to bring you a brand new drafting guide for Dominaria United. So in today's video, I'll be going over all 10 draft archetypes for each color pairing in the set, as well as a potentially secret one that you may or may not have seen already. And I'll be going over removal and bombs for each color, so you'll know what to look for when you sit down for your first Dominaria United draft. All right, so our first archetype to go over today is going to be white-blue tempo flyers. This deck aims to take control of the game by slowing your opponents down and playing evasive creatures to deal damage. Some signpost uncommons for this draft archetype are Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart, and Tura, Kenarud Sky Knight. Both of these creatures reward you for playing instants and sorceries and even help create flyers and pump your team. Look for additional flyers like Talus Lookout or Mesa Cavalier to dominate the skies. Cards like Impede Momentum and Stall for Time also slow down your opponent and allow you to take over the game. Our next draft archetype is Blue-Black Control. This is a classic control deck that wants to play plenty of removal and value creatures to gain the advantage over the course of the game. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Rona, Sheoldred's Faithful, and Vohar, Vodalian Desecrator. Vohar helps you loot and play your best instant or sorcery from the graveyard later in the game, and Rona punishes your opponent when you play instants and sorceries. She also comes back from the graveyard later if you need her. Rona's Vortex is a powerful tempo card that can also act as removal thanks to Kicker, and there are no shortage of counterspells in this format either, for those of you that love playing that sort of game. You know who you are. Look out for Phyrexian Rager to draw more cards and Frostfist Strider to stun an opponent's creature and provide a beefy body. Black and blue both have a ton of removal, so stick around to the end of the video where I'll showcase all of those spells as well. Our next draft archetype is Blue-Red Spells. This color pair aims to play aggressive creatures and take advantage of playing tons of instants and sorceries. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Balmor, Battle Mage Captain, and Nahal, the Stormrunner. Nahal lets you cast your sorceries at instant speed, and Balmor gets beefier with every instant or sorcery you cast. Electrostatic Infantry and Gitu Amplifier are two creatures that get stronger with each instant and sorcery you play. And look out for Timely Interference, which can help force your opponent's creature to block your hefty Tolarian Terror, which gets cheaper to cast for each instant and sorcery in your graveyard. Next up, we have Green-Blue Stompy Ramp. This classic duo wants to grab tons of lands and play gigantic creatures. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Tatiova, Steward of Tides, and Nael Avizao Aeronaut. Nael helps you dig for more lands, and Tatiova animates them into 3/3 flyers with haste. Joint Exploration and Slimefoot Survey both get you more lands so that you can finish off your opponent with a kicked Pixie Illusionist or a chunky Mossbeard Ancient. Moving on to our next archetype, we have Black-Red Aggro. This deck is relentless and will have your opponents asking for a break when you swing with creatures every single turn. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Lagomos, Hand of Hatred, and Garna, Blood Fist of Keld. Garna helps you draw cards after your attacking creatures die, and Lagomos helps you create an extra creature every turn to attack. Lagomos also helps you find your best card if 5 or more creatures die on a turn. The deceptively cute Phoenix Chick is the perfect relentless attacker in this deck, and Balduvian Atrocity is an evasive threat which brings back another creature from your graveyard for its kicker cost. Finish off your opponents with Warhost Frenzy, which pumps your team and draws you cards when they die if it was kicked, and Battle Rage Blessing, which saves your creature and hopefully takes down your opponent's best threat. Next up, we have Red-Green Domain. This deck uses the Domain mechanic to make your creatures and spells more powerful based on the amount of basic land types that you control. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Radha, Coalition Warlord, and Rulik Mon's Warren Chief. Rulik helps you dig for more lands, and Radha helps pump up a creature based on the amount of basic land types you control. The Stinky Sprouting Goblin lets you fetch a land if it was kicked, or even sacrifice lands later in the game to draw cards. And Nishoba Brawler gets more powerful with each basic land type you control. Grab more lands with the Weatherseed Treaty, which also makes a Saproling token, and then use Gaia's Might to pump up that little plant into a large tree. Our next archetype is Red White Enlist. This deck uses the Enlist mechanic to make an attacking creature extra beefy by tapping untapped creatures during combat. Do be warned, however, that Enlist only buffs a creature's power and not their toughness. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Tori Donvenant Fury Rider and Baird Argivian Recruiter. Baird helps you create extra white soldier tokens, and Tori helps pump your attacking creatures and provides extra keywords if they're red or white. The Vigilant Benalish Faithbonder is a nice cheap enlist creature, and an enlisted Balduvian Berserker is tough to block because when it dies, it deals damage to any target equal to its power. Use joined forces in multiple ways to buff your team and untap creatures you've enlisted, and then save your biggest threat with Furious Bellow, which gives a creature +3 attack and first strike. Up next, we have green-white Go Wide tokens. This deck wants to crowd the board with creatures, buff them up, and smash your opponent into oblivion. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Queen Alanal of Ruadak and Zar Ojanen, Scion of Efraba. Zar puts +1/+1 counters on your team based on domain, and Queen Alanal helps you create extra white soldier tokens. Speaking of tokens, Scout the Wilderness lets you find a land and make 2 soldier tokens when you kick it, and Captain's Call just straight up makes 3 white soldier tokens. Get a discount on Argivian Phalanx for each creature you control, and pump up the team with Charismatic Vanguard's activated ability. Our second to last draft archetype is White-Black Sacrifice. This deck gains value by sacrificing your own creatures, draining your opponents of their life, while also gaining some for yourself. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Aaron, Benalia's Ruin, and Ellis Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim. Ellis drains or gains based on creatures entering or leaving your battlefield, and Aaron helps you pump up your team with +1/+1 counters when you sacrifice a creature. Force your opponent to sacrifice a creature when you kick a Benalish Sleeper, or sacrifice your Splatter Goblin to give another creature -1/-1 until end of turn. Then when you need that goblin back, grab it from the yard with a kicked Phyrexian Missionary, and fly over the top with a pumped up Sengir Connoisseur who gets bigger whenever one or more creatures die. And finally, we have Black-Green Graveyard. This is a classic grindy deck that uses self-mill to generate value and card advantage. The signpost uncommons for this archetype are Bortuk, Bone Rattle, and Urg, Spurn of Turg. Urg cares about lands in your graveyard, and Bortuk helps reanimate a creature based on domain. Eerie Soul Tender helps you fill up your graveyard and then grab a creature back later in the game. And Urborg Repossession gains you 2 life and returns 1 or 2 creatures back to your hand from the graveyard if it was kicked. Finish off your opponent with a discounted Writhing Necromass, or give your team Menace with a kicked Bog Badger. My sweet, sweet preview card. Oh yeah, and Dominaria United has a secret archetype. Last, but certainly not least, we have White, Blue, Black Defender. The goal with this deck is to defend and gain value with those pesky big booty walls. There are only 9 Defender cards in the entire set, and one of them is green, so if you want to make this work, be sure to snag every white, blue, black, or colorless wall you see. Use Shield Sentinel to fetch your best defender, and finish off opponents with Blight Pile, which deals damage equal to the number of defenders you control to target opponent, or Coral Colony, which mills your opponent for each defender you control. Now, even though I've shown you 11 draft archetypes, 10 from each color pairing, and then a bonus defender archetype, I just want to say that there is a ton of fixing in Dominaria United, and you should feel free to splash around. Thanks to the addition of common typed dual lands, you can play just about any deck you want from 3 color, 4 color, even 5 colors. Okay, time to move on to removal. Removal is important in just about every draft deck, and there is tons of good removal in Dominaria United. So let's go over a few good removal spells in each color, as well as board wipes that you'll see while drafting the new set. Starting with white, we have Destroy Evil, which destroys a creature with toughness 4 or greater, and Runic Shot, which destroys a tapped creature. White also has some classic enchantment-based removal with Citizen's Arrest and Prayer of Binding, which has Flash. Temporary Lockdown is a rare enchantment that can wipe the board of creatures with mana value 2 or less. Blue doesn't have any removal per se, but it does have a ton of tempo that can act as removal. I mentioned Rona's Vortex earlier for blue-black control, and it is definitely the best removal in quotation marks spell. Blue also gets the Phasing of Zhalfir, which is a rare saga that actually destroys creatures. This card is super flexible and powerful, so grab it if you see it. Surprise, surprise, black has some amazing removal in Dominaria United. Extinguish a Light and Cut Down go well in just about any black deck, while Tribute to Urborg is slightly better in blue-black because of Kicker, and Bone Splinters is best in white-black where sacrificing creatures is a good thing. If that wasn't enough, black also has access to 2 board wipes. Choking Miasma is uncommon and takes care of a ton of threats in the format, and Drag to the Bottom is a rare domain-based board wipe. Red also has lots of solid removal in this set. Lightning Strike is back, dealing 3 damage to any target, and Jaya's Fire Nado goes in any red deck desperate for removal. Fires of Victory and Herloon Battle Hymn are better when you kick them, but are also just fine on their own. Red also gets Temporal Firestorm, which is a rare, flexible board wipe with Kicker. Green has access to the classic Fight and Bite spells with Bite Down and Tail Swipe. You'll usually want to take advantage of pump spells or removal from another color when playing green, but these can work just fine. And finally, I'd like to go over some bombs in Dominaria United. A bomb is a card that should be taken super highly during a draft and can likely just win you the game on its own. Here is 1 bomb per color that I suggest taking over every other card in a pack. First up, we have Karn's Silex. I didn't mention this card during the board wipe section because I wanted to save it as a colorless bomb. This card goes in any deck and is a flexible board wipe, which, needless to say, is incredible. I played it during early access and it won me the game several times. Next, we have Serra Paragon, which is not only a 3/4 flyer for 4 mana, but also lets you play a land or cast a permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard on each of your turns. Incredible value on a single creature, and quickly takes over the game by reanimating your board. For blue, I chose Sphinx of Clear Skies, which is a 5/5 flyer for 5 with Ward 2. Whenever the Sphinx deals combat damage to a player, you make 2 piles of cards from the top of your library based on domain, and your opponent puts 1 pile in your hand and the other in the graveyard. A 5/5 flyer with Ward 2 is already great, and the card advantage it generates can help close out the game very quickly. The main villain of the set, Sheoldred, is not only really cool looking, but they are also extremely powerful. A 4/5 Death Touch creature for 4 mana that gains you 2 life when you draw a card and drains your opponent for 2 life when they draw a card? Sign me up, she's incredible. Red has maybe my favorite bomb in the set, which is Shivan Devastator. This is yet another flying creature, but this time it has haste and gets +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana you pay when you cast it. A lot of the time, casting this card will straight up win you the game that turn, and for that reason, it's a certified bomb. And finally, we have Defiler of Vigor, the best of the Phyrexian Defiler cycle. For 5 mana, you get a 6/6 trampling body that also allows you to pay 2 life to help cast your green spells, and puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control when you cast a green permanent. If this card is not dealt with immediately, your opponent may as well concede. Alright, that should do it for my Dominaria United draft guide. I hope this video is helpful for both newcomers and Magic boomers like myself, so please let me and Wizards of the Coast know what you think in the comments below. Dominaria United seems like a super fun draft format, and I can't wait to play more when it comes out soon. Once again, I'm Andy, also known as GarbageAndy on Twitch and everywhere else on the internet, and thank you for watching.